Okay, so you want to own a marina. Buy some waterfront land, build a few docks, charge boat owners to tie up their vessels, and watch the slip fees roll in every month without lifting a finger. The boats park themselves, the rent arrives on its own. And you own a piece of the American coastline that nobody can take from you. Here is the strange part. In February 2025, Blackstone, the largest alternative asset manager on Earth with more than $1 trillion under management, paid $5.65 billion to acquire 138 marinas across the United States and Puerto Rico. Not because slip fees are exceptional, because slip fees are the least interesting part of what a marina actually sells. And because the people who figured that out first built one of the most quietly powerful business moats in American commercial real estate. By the end of this video, you will know exactly why 56% of marinas in America run at over 95% occupancy, but only 44% of operators reported a profit increase last year. What the ground underneath the water can cost you the moment you sign the deed. Why building a new marina from scratch is one of the most legally complex projects in American commercial real estate. Why the same family marina that prints money in June is fighting for survival in December. And what it actually means when Wall Street decides an industry full of small family businesses is suddenly worth $5.5 billion to own. Let's start with what it costs to get in, because the number surprises almost everyone who has not looked at this closely. A marina is, fundamentally, a piece of waterfront real estate with infrastructure sitting on top of it. That sounds simple. What makes it complicated is that waterfront real estate is among the most expensive and most tightly regulated land in the country. There are roughly 12,000 marinas operating in the United States right now. Nearly 86% of them have been in business for more than 20 years. Around 40% have been open for more than 50 years. Those numbers are not coincidental. They are a direct consequence of how difficult it is to build something new. More on that in a moment. A small inland marina, 50 to 100 slips on a freshwater lake or river in a secondary market, trades for $1 million to $3 million. A full-service coastal marina with a fuel dock, a boatyard, and 200 or more slips trades between $5 million and $20 million depending on location, slip count, and the ancillary revenue the operation generates. The industry standard valuation runs roughly $12,000 per slip in a mid-tier market. That means a 200-slip marina at that benchmark is worth $2.4 million on slip count alone before the land, the fuel system, the haul-out equipment, or any amenities are priced in. In premium coastal markets, the Newport Beaches, the South Floridas, the Nantuckets, that per-slip number climbs past $25,000 and in some high-demand harbors trades above $40,000 per slip. Newport Beach's Balboa Yacht Basin published its 2025 to 2026 rate sheet showing a 40-foot slip at $53.34 per foot per month. That is $25,603 per year from one slip. The math gets interesting fast. Then there is the infrastructure itself, and this is where most first-time buyers get their first serious surprise. Floating docks capable of handling boats up to 50 feet cost $1,000 to $2,000 per linear foot installed new. A 200-slip marina averaging 35-foot slips is sitting on roughly 7,000 linear feet of dock. At $1,500 per foot, that dock system represents $10.5 million in replacement cost sitting in the water. Piling replacement runs $500 to $2,000 per piling depending on water depth and material. A 200-slip marina might have 600 to 800 pilings. In saltwater, the corrosive effect of the marine environment accelerates deterioration on everything from dock hardware to electrical pedestals. The 2025 Marina Dock Age Annual Survey found that 85% of marina operators reported rising insurance costs, 71% rising utility costs, and 70% rising staff costs. Most buyers of existing marinas are acquiring docks built 20 to 30 years ago that will need significant capital investment within a decade. The price on the purchase agreement does not include the capital you will spend keeping the operation functional. Now here is the thing that nobody tells you until after you have already written the check. You can buy a marina, but you almost certainly cannot build one. And that distinction is the entire foundation of the business case. The regulatory apparatus governing coastal construction in the United States has made new marina development one of the most complex and time-consuming projects in American commercial real estate. At the federal level, the Army Corps of Engineers controls permitting for any construction in or over navigable waters under Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act of 1899 and Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. Any dredging, filling, or structure placement in tidal or navigable waters requires a U.S. SAICS permit before a single piling can be driven. Starting work without one is not a civil matter. It is a federal crime. Beyond the Corps, a new marina project typically touches the EPA, the state's Coastal Management Authority, the State Environmental Quality Agency, the State Department of Fish and Wildlife, and in some states a separate Tidelands Lease Authority that controls the submerged land the dock will be built over. In California, any coastal development requires a permit from the California Coastal Commission, which has authority to override local approvals. In New Jersey, the DEP Coastal Zone Management Program reviews all waterfront construction. In Delaware, major new marinas require 2 separate public notice periods, plus a subaqueous lands lease from the state before construction can begin. Wetland delineation studies, water quality certifications, endangered species assessments, stormwater management plans. A comprehensive permit package for a new 100-slip coastal marina can run $200,000 to $500,000 in professional fees alone before a single physical permit is issued. And the timeline from concept to approved permit routinely runs 3 to 7 years. 3 to 7 years of planning, engineering, legal, and environmental consulting costs before you break ground. That is why the industry has been running on 50-year-old infrastructure. Building new is structurally easier to avoid than to attempt. This is the moat. The marina you are buying already has its permits. The dock is already in the water. The environmental baseline is already established. A competitor cannot simply arrive across the harbor and build a competing facility. The land and the regulatory approval together form a barrier that is as durable and as defensible as anything in American business. You are not just buying a marina. You are buying a permission that will never be issued again. Now the question that actually matters, where does the money come from? Because it is not entirely the slips, and this is the part that breaks people's brains. Slip rental rates in 2026 run $10 to $35 per foot per month at inland and mid-tier coastal marinas and $50 to $100 or more at premium coastal locations. A 40-foot slip at a mid-tier coastal marina at $25 per foot per month generates $12,000 per year. A 200-slip marina at full occupancy averaging $12,000 per slip annually produces $2.4 million in gross slip revenue. That sounds like a business. And it is. But the operators who build real wealth in this industry understand something the slip revenue number does not show. The slip is not the product. The slip is the relationship, and the relationship is what you monetize. Start with fuel. A marina fuel dock is a gas station on water, with one critical difference. The customer is already at your dock. They are not comparison shopping across the harbor. A busy coastal marina moves 300,000 to 500,000 gallons of diesel and gasoline annually. A twin-engine sport fisher doing a single offshore run burns 150 to 300 gallons in a day. The marina clips $0.50 to $1.50 per gallon on every transaction. At 400,000 gallons and a 0.90 margin, the fuel dock contributes $360,000 in gross margin before operating costs. And the fuel dock does something the slip lease cannot do. It generates return visits. The boat that fueled at your dock last Saturday will fuel there again next Saturday because the dock is already where the boat lives. Then haul out and winter storage, which in northern climate marinas is often the highest margin line in the entire operation. A marina with a travel lift can haul a 40-foot vessel, pressure wash the hull, and yard store it for the off-season for $3,000 to $7,000 per boat, depending on vessel and market. In the Great Lakes, New England, and Mid-Atlantic, boating season runs roughly May through October. The boat has to go somewhere for the other 6 months. The marina that holds the only lift in a 20-mile radius is not competing for that storage business. It is the only option. And once the boat is out of the water and sitting in the yard, the owner has 6 months to think about everything they meant to fix during the season. The marina that hauls the boat is the marina that gets the repair work. Fiberglass, engines, electronics, bottom paint, winterization, spring commissioning. A full-service boat yard generates $150 to $300 per labor hour in a market where qualified marine mechanics have become genuinely difficult to find. Dry stack storage is its own category and the fastest-growing segment in the industry. boats stored on racks in a covered building rather than floating in a slip. A dry stack system stores 3 to 5 boats in the vertical space that one slip occupies in the water. Rack storage for a 25-foot boat runs $2,500 to $4,000 per season. For the marina, the capital cost of a dry stack structure is offset by the density advantage. More boats stored per square foot of property than wet slip storage allows. The 2025 Marina Dock Age Survey found that dry storage revenue increased year over year for 29% of respondents, making it one of the few categories where growth has consistently outpaced slip revenue. Transient slips are the category most ownership models underestimate. A transient slip is dock space rented by the night to cruising boaters passing through. Transient rates run $3 to $6 per foot per night at most mid-tier coastal marinas, and considerably higher at destination ports. A 40-foot boat at $4 per foot per night is $160 per night. A marina with 20 transient slips running 60% occupancy through a 6-month season generates roughly $580,000 in transient revenue. And transient customers fuel up, eat at the Waterfront restaurant, and spend money at the ship store. They are the highest-yielding customer type per visit because they are on vacation and they have no long-term lease protecting their rate. Then, live aboards. Boat owners who actually live on their vessel at the marina full-time typically pay a premium of 15 to 25% above the standard slip rate. They consume electricity at a rate no seasonal boater does. Most marinas meter electric separately and bill it at cost plus a service margin. A live aboard on 50 amp service running marine air conditioning in July can add $200 to $400 to their monthly bill beyond the slip fee. 20 live aboard tenants generates a utility revenue stream that barely shows up in the pitch deck but falls straight to the bottom line every single month. The full revenue picture of a well-run 200-slip coastal marina: $2.4 million from seasonal slip rentals, $360,000 from fuel margin, $400,000 from haul-out and winter storage, $250,000 from yard labor and repair, $180,000 from dry stack, $150,000 from transient slips, $80,000 from live aboard premiums and metered electric, $200,000 from a waterfront restaurant lease or food and beverage operation. Total gross revenue approaching $4 million. That is not one business. That is 6 businesses running on one piece of waterfront, all sharing the same customer base, all cross-selling into each other. The slip is the acquisition cost. The dependency is the product. Every boat owner who rents a slip is also a potential fuel customer, storage customer, repair customer, and restaurant customer. The slip gets them on the dock. Everything else keeps them spending while they are there. Now the liability problem. And this is where every first-time marina buyer who skipped their homework discovers what they actually bought. A marina sits at the intersection of water, petroleum, and aging infrastructure. Every one of those 3 things carries its own regulatory exposure, and the combination creates a contamination profile that general commercial liability policies were not designed to cover. Fuel systems at marinas operate under the same EPA underground storage tank rules as gas stations. A failed diesel tank seal can contaminate groundwater and trigger a cleanup cost of $500,000 or more, with the liability following the property deed and not the previous operator. One documented case from the industry: an excavation contractor ruptured an unmarked petroleum pipeline during marina renovation work. Cleanup costs and business interruption exceeded $500,000. The contractor went bankrupt. The marina owner absorbed the remainder because the contamination was on their property. Another case: a buyer discovered post-closing that decades of boat maintenance work had left soils contaminated with lead paint and asbestos. The previous owner had no disclosure obligation under the terms of the purchase agreement. The new owner had a contamination problem and no recourse. Phase 1 and Phase 2. Environmental site assessments before any marina acquisition run $15,000 to $40,000. They are not optional. They are the difference between a business acquisition and an environmental remediation project that came disguised as a marina. Clean Water Act provisions also govern stormwater runoff, bilge pump discharge, and hull paint chemicals leaching into the basin. Environmental insurance for a commercial marina operation costs $20,000 to $60,000 annually. In hurricane zones along the Gulf and Atlantic coasts, property insurance has increased 30 to 50% in 3 years. The 2025 Marina Dock Age Survey found that 78% of operators expected expenses to increase in the coming year, even as only 52% expected revenues to keep pace. Rising costs are consuming the rate increases before they reach the bottom line. Now let's talk about what actually happens when this business goes wrong. Because understanding the failure mode is the only way to see the real risk underneath the model. In the early 1990s, a family-run marina in coastal South Carolina operated 160 slips, a fuel dock, a modest boat yard, and a small ship store. For most of 2 decades, it was one of the more profitable operations on that stretch of coast. Steady occupancy, a loyal customer base, a location that boaters returning from offshore trips would recognize from 10 miles out by the fuel dock lighting. The family had owned it since the 1970s. In the mid-2000s, the second generation took over and began expanding. They added dry rack storage in 2007. They took on $2.8 million in construction debt to build a new enclosed boat barn. Then 2008 happened. The financial crisis did not kill recreational boating immediately, but it killed it steadily. New boat sales nationally collapsed more than 50% between 2007 and 2010. Boaters who might have upgraded to larger vessels held on to what they had. Boaters who were stretched financially sold their boats outright. Slip occupancy at the marina dropped from 94% in 2007 to 71% by 2010. Fuel volume fell with it. The dry rack barn they had borrowed $2.8 million to build was operating at 40% capacity. The construction debt service did not change. The revenue had. By 2012, the family was in discussions with the bank about restructuring the loan. By 2014, they were in default. The marina sold in a distressed transaction in 2015 for $3.1 million, a fraction of what the family had invested across 40 years of ownership and capital improvements. The buyer, a regional marina management company, spent 18 months renegotiating supplier contracts, cutting staff, repricing the fuel dock, and adding a live-aboard program that the previous owners had resisted for years because they did not like the aesthetic of people living on boats in their yard. Within 3 years, the same 160 slip operation was generating 40% more revenue than at its peak under the family's management. Not because the market recovered, because the new operator understood that the marina was not in the boat parking business. It was in the boat dependency business, and they priced every service accordingly. The lesson is not that family ownership fails. The lesson is that the marina's greatest strength, its captive, loyal, returning customer base, is also its greatest vulnerability. A customer base that has nowhere else to go will stay through a slow downturn right up until they cannot, and the debt you took on in the good years will outlast the customer loyalty that funded it. This is exactly the dynamic that Wall Street recognized when it began acquiring marina portfolios at scale. Which brings us back to February 2025 and Blackstone's $5.65 billion acquisition of Safe Harbor Marinas. Safe Harbor was already the largest marina and superyacht servicing business in the United States before Blackstone arrived. 138 locations, thousands of slips, fuel docks, boat yards, dry rack systems, the full vertical stack of services that the best-run marinas in the country use to extract maximum revenue from each relationship. Sun Communities, the REIT that sold Safe Harbor to Blackstone, reported that the marina portfolio generated $266.3 million in core funds from operations for the full year of 2024. Blackstone paid $565 billion for that income stream. That is roughly a 21 times multiple on annual cash flow, not a multiple you pay for a commodity business, a multiple you pay for infrastructure. For a portfolio of permitted, operating, irreplaceable waterfront assets sitting on land that cannot be replicated, serving a customer base that is affluent, prepaying, and captive. 69% of recreational boaters have household incomes above $75,000. They do not switch marinas because the slip fee went up $50 per month. They do not haul their boat home because the fuel was 20 cents more per gallon at the dock. They renew their leases. They fill up at your pump. They store with you through the winter. They pay your mechanic, they eat at your restaurant, and they are, on average, less price-sensitive than almost any other consumer category in the American economy. Blackstone framed the acquisition as a play on the blue economy, the growing sector of coastal and maritime economic activity driven by rising leisure travel, increasing coastal population density, and a secular trend toward experiential spending. What they were actually saying in cleaner language is that they had found 138 permitted monopolies on coastal access in a market where the supply of dock space has been declining for years while demand has been climbing. That combination is not a commodity business. It is infrastructure. And infrastructure, when you own enough of it in the right places, does not compete. It simply collects. Two scenarios, real numbers, side by side. Scenario 1, a small inland marina on a freshwater lake in the Midwest, 75 slips, annual slip revenue at 92% occupancy, and $8,000 average per slip, $552,000. Fuel margin and winter storage at $180,000. Total gross revenue, $730,000. Operating expenses including insurance, dock maintenance, a part-time manager, utilities, and debt service on a $1.2 million acquisition loan at current rates, $620,000. Net to the owner in a good year, $110,000. This is a real return on a lifestyle business. It works. It supports a family. It does not require 80-hour weeks, but it requires attention, and it has no room for error. One bad weather season, one fuel system failure, 1 year where the spring launch is delayed by high water and the margin disappears. This version of the business is not a wealth machine. It is a very good real estate holding with an operating business attached. Scenario 2, a full-service coastal marina, 250 slips, a fuel dock moving 400,000 gallons annually, a boatyard with a travel lift, 15 acres of waterfront in a mid-Atlantic coastal market. Acquisition at $12 million. Annual gross revenue from all sources, slips, fuel, haul-out, storage, yard labor, transient, live-aboard premiums, and a restaurant lease, $4.2 million. Operating expenses including a full management team, dock staff, licensed mechanics, environmental compliance insurance, property insurance at post-2023 coastal rates, and debt service on a $9 million acquisition loan, $3.4 million. Net operating income, $800,000. At a 6x EBITDA multiple, the operating business alone is worth approximately $4.8 million above the underlying real estate. Buy it at $12 million. Optimize every ancillary revenue stream, add a live-aboard program, push transient rates to market, get the dry stack to 85% utilization, and the business supporting a $16 to $18 million exit is not a fantasy. It is what regional acquirers have been doing with family-run marina inventory across the American coast for the last decade, and it is what Blackstone did at scale with 138 of them at once. That is the actual economics of owning a marina. The slips fill the docks, the fuel fills the boats, the winter storage fills the yard, the transient slips fill the shoulder season, the restaurant fills the hours between launch and sunset, and the environmental liability fills the fine print of every purchase agreement that skipped the Phase 2 site assessment before the wire transfer cleared. The permit moat keeps competitors from building, the waterfront keeps them from locating elsewhere. The captive customer keeps the revenue recurring year after year after year, and the dependency, the boat that needs fuel, needs hauling, needs storage, needs maintenance, and needs somewhere to live, keeps every service you offer priced above what the market would bear if the customer had a real alternative. Get every piece right, price the dependency correctly, own the waterfront that cannot be rebuilt, and you hold something that Blackstone just paid $5.65 billion to own 138 of. Miss the environmental due diligence on the fuel system the previous owner installed in 1989, inherit a contaminated basin, and you will spend the first 4 years of ownership on a cleanup that the EPA will supervise and the previous owner's attorneys will successfully argue was not their problem. The water does not care when the spill happened. It only cares about when you signed the deed. And neither does the bank.